here by I'm joined here by my team members as well. You can wave your hands again. So welcome to Social Planning Toronto's Provincial Election Community Forum. Please introduce yourselves in the chat if you haven't yet. Your names, your pronouns, community group you're affiliated with. And if you want to change your name to remain anonymous, you can do that as well. You can activate your captions as well. Down at the bottom, you'll see a CC button, and that should activate them. If you do have any questions today, you can ask them in the chat, and our team will do our best to answer them on the spot. But if there are questions for the speakers, we will have a Q&A after the speakers, and you're welcome to ask them any questions. Yeah, another housekeeping note is to just be respectful of other folks' comments and lived experience. So try to, also share speaking time with others so you're not taking up too much space, and stay muted if you're not talking, please. Thank you. And then lastly, I'll just say that this is a nonpartisan event, so that means that SPT will not be engaging in conversations about specific political parties or agendas or endorsing or supporting any political parties. But we will talk about the issues that are important to communities. So please be mindful of that as we continue this conversation. So as many of you know, we had a snap election this year. Sorry, I shouldn't say had because it's still happening. We are running more than 1 year ahead of schedule than a regular election, Ontario election term. So the shorter election period for the Ontario election can contribute to lower voter turnout, especially because it's winter right now. The winter season makes it more difficult for people to come out and vote in person. There's also less time for organizations to do analysis, for communities to organize, to engage the public, and also to learn about candidates. So this is a tough election year, and there's also more opportunity for misinformation when there's such a short timeline, because news outlets and other sources are scrambling to just get research verified, facts verified. And, it's also an opportunity for people running for the election to also engage in that misinformation if they want. So I encourage everyone to learn as much as you can about your candidates. If you can attend all candidates events, please do. A lot of them have happened already. Research your political parties as much as possible and their promises. Check to see if their promises align with what you want to see for your community, and what your priorities are. And make sure if you do get a chance to watch the leaders debate, that's also a really interesting thing that you can use to kind of gauge what different platforms are committing to this year, or sorry, different political parties, the 4 major political parties. And if you get a chance to speak with your candidates, ask them as many questions as possible. And we'll talk more about engagement through our speakers as well. Oh, snap. So I'm going to skip the slide because John's going to go over this later. We do have in Ontario first past the post system, which I think many of you know about. So when oh gosh, Drake is missing. I don't know what happened to him. There he is. So what the first past post system means is that the candidate that wins the most votes in each electoral district is the winner, regardless if their vote is less than 50% of the votes cast. So the way it works is that we as voters vote for the local candidate of our choice in our riding. So it's a geographical district. The greatest number of votes become the candidate with the greatest number of votes becomes the member of parliament for provincial parliament for that electoral district. And then the political party with the greatest number of elected MPPs across the province forms the new provincial government. which will be majority or minority. So in Ontario, the four major political parties are the Green Party, New Democratic Party, Progressive Conservative, and the Liberal Party. And we are using colors here as an example so that when you look at your ballot and you go vote, you'll see the party name under the candidate for MPP for each party. So even if Justin Bieber in your riding, let's say you're riding Celebrity Central, wins the most votes, he will become MPP, but it doesn't mean that that party is going to be in power necessarily. So on a province-wide scale, let's say if the Yellow Party wins the most seats across across Ontario, if the Yellow Party wins, then Drake would become the premier. And that means that the Yellow Party would have to have the most seats across the entire province. But one thing to note is that in our last election, provincial election, the Progressive Conservative Party formed a majority government with only 40% of the Ontario vote. So they won 83 out of 124 seats. And I encourage you to look at the last provincial election to see how many votes each party got in your riding. We had a low voter turnout in the last election as well. So the majority government that was voted in was supported by 17% of eligible voters. And this is why sometimes people engage in strategic voting. So this would involve doing research about which parties might be closest in the running, and then you would decide to vote for the one that you want, that might have a better chance of winning for whatever reason, but you might not necessarily give your vote to a party that's maybe not doing so well. I'm not encouraging this in any way. I'm just saying that this is a strategy that people use when they vote. And there are other systems of voting one called proportional representation, which parties gain seats in proportion to the number of votes cast for them. So that's very different than first past the post, which is the system we have. Lastly, we have 124 electoral districts in Ontario. So Elections Ontario will have more information about how our political process works, but this is just using it as an example so that you can feel comfortable when you look at your ballot and you know what's going on, although I know many of you already know how this works. In terms of provincial domains, just wanted to quickly highlight that these are some of the major areas that the provincial government is responsible for. So now I'm really excited to share that we're gonna start learning from some of our presenters. So our first presenter is Beatriz Alice with North York Community House, who's going to talk about the Get Out the Vote campaign.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to take a minute. Saroja, if you don't mind to stop sharing, so I can share my slides.
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you.
For some reason, it's not working for me. Oh, there we go. I think that's ready for you.
All right, give me 1 second. Just give me 1 sec so I can see my notes. Okay, here we go. Can everyone see it? Okay, great. So good evening, everyone. So my name is Beatriz Alas, and I work for North York Community House in the role of Community Engagement Coordinator. And at North York Community House for probably, I would say at least the last decade, maybe even longer, we've been trying to organize a Get Out the Vote campaign every time that there is an election, no matter which level is calling it. And sometimes when there's more time given, we're able to do a little bit more. And when there's less time, as in this case, we're able to do less. But the goal of the campaign has more or less remained the same through all this time. And that is to be able to provide basic information about the election. So when is it happening? Where are we supposed to vote? What we need to bring in order to be able to vote. This is especially important for young people that are turning 18, for newcomers that just became citizens, or for anyone that has moved because they may not necessarily get their voter information card in the mail on time. We also, one of the other things that we try to do is to share a list of the candidates. Another thing that we have found that's really important, because a lot of the time we may not necessarily see the list of people that are running in our riding until we are in front of the ballot, which is way too late to do any kind of real good research on them or on the parties that they're representing. And another thing that we also try to do is to share links to fact-checked information, or if there are fact sheets that become available. We don't have the capacity to develop those ourselves, so we depend on organizations like Social Planning Toronto, or other organizations that have the capacity to provide those. So we try to share them as much as we can. And of course, all in the with the goal of being able to make a more informed vote as much as we can. So the campaign, from my from my observation so far, has 3 different components. So it has an educational component where participants are invited to take part in a 1 hour or 1.5 hour online workshop and orientation session. It has an action component where participants are able to post and or distribute our ready to vote posters. And these are customized to each participant's postal code. So if we have participants living in one building and then participants living in a nearby building, their voting location on election day may actually be different. So they would have 2 different posters. And yes, that's the other thing. We do tend to focus on people that live in buildings because they share the same postal code, and because it's a good way to engage with their neighbors because they're all living together. So buildings or multi-residential units are ideal. And then the other component that we have to the campaign is to be able to have inclusive, fun, and hands-on activities, such as, for example, when elections take place during decent weather, we are able to engage youth to do things like sidewalk chalking or some other outdoor activities. More recently, at least these elections, one of the things that we did do, which was at our Family Day celebration, was that last week? I've lost track of time. I think it was last Friday. We engaged participants in a bracelet making activity. John, that's the old democracy bracelets that we've been doing since forever. And we adapted the activity to fit with the current theme, which of course is the provincial elections. So you can see some pictures. This is actually, the middle picture here is a photo of 2 residents from the last elections that we had, the by-election. So you can see there's a long list of candidates there, but that's what the poster looks like on the left. And then on the right-hand side is the instructions that we provided to participants last week. The workshop and orientation session, in terms of the educational components, it provides a review of our first past the post electoral system, which Saroja did really well in conducting us through today and doing a review of that. And of course, one of the things that we find out when we look at that is the reason why, you know, sometimes in the media we'll hear about majority or minority governments, and often people will ask, well, what does that mean? And how does that impact anything? And of course, that makes all the difference in a lot of different things. So we do a review of that system. And we also review who is eligible to vote, as well as major policy areas or responsibilities of the government level that is undergoing elections. So in this case, on the left-hand side of the slide, you can see provincial responsibilities, not all of the ones that we just went over, but some of the major ones. And then we also try to provide links to information about the promises that are being made by the major political parties. So this time around, I was able to find these two promise trackers or platform trackers. One is from Feed Ontario. They have a really good kind of summary of the different issues. Of course, they focus on reducing poverty across the province. So do check them out if you get a chance. And then Global News is the other one that I found that did a really nice job of kind of separating all the different responsibilities and then each of the promises around those responsibilities from the various political parties. So we've included those two links in our poster. And then the action component provides an opportunity for participants to take action within their own buildings and or within their neighborhood. So first, participants are asked to obtain permission from their property manager to post and or to distribute our ready to vote poster. And we support them by providing a letter, such as the one that you see on the left-hand side, to assist them with that process negotiation with their property managers. Sometimes we are successful, sometimes we're not. And we let participants know that, you know, if they're not successful, there's nothing we can do, right? But we try. And then secondly, participants are asked to pick up the copies of their posters from our main location. And what we do to provide, to support them there is to provide them with TTC tickets or tokens so that it at least covers the cost of their transportation. And finally, participants are asked to post and or distribute those posters within their building or amongst their neighbors. And finally, as I said before, we try to provide opportunities for participants of all ages sorry, did I miss a slide? No, I did not. Okay, so lastly, we try to make the campaign open to everyone, whether they are eligible to vote or not yet. So for example, youth in high school are encouraged to participate in exchange for community hours. I know last year 2 years ago when we had a year and a half, when we had the by-election, I had one youth that participated. And then she ended up asking for a reference letter because she was doing all this, like she was really, really smart and trying to get into all these beautiful programs. So we were able to support her with that. As well, sometimes newcomer participants, it's really useful for them to acknowledge their efforts, especially if they're trying to, you know, update their education or get employment and so on. And then kids and young people are engaged, as I mentioned before, in the fun activities. So this time around, because of the weather situation, the young girls that usually do the sidewalk chalking, they're going to be using something called snow chalk, which I'd never heard about before. So this is my wonderful colleague, Rikisha, who's going to be guiding them through that. And they managed to get permission. I think it's their local school that gave them permission. So they're going to be doing it there. And basically what they do is they draw arrows or hearts to guide the adults that are eligible to vote to the local, you know, the voting station where they're supposed to vote, and also to encourage them to vote. And then I already mentioned before about our Family Day activity, and you can see some of the pictures here. So we took people through, like the first part was kind of like a dotmocracy where they voted with their dots on the areas, you know, that the province takes care of that are most important for them and their families. And then using that information, then we took them through the major promises that we were able to get from those two sites that I mentioned before. And then they kind of circled all the promises that they really liked. And then they made bracelets according to the colors of the parties that are making those promises. So that's what that bracelet in the middle signifies. So you can see some of the orange representing the NDP there and some of the green party promises there. That's it. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. That was really informative. It was really motivating to see so many young people involved in voter engagement. And I'm sure that a lot of people here are curious about how they can model this program in their own communities. So thank you so much for sharing that. And now we're going to have Khairiya, who also works out of Lawrence Heights, especially with engaging youth in civic initiatives. She's going to speak to just building off of what Beatrice was sharing and how she's been involved as well in that work.
Hi, good evening, everyone. You guys can hear me, right? Good. Yeah, okay. So good evening, everyone. So my name is Khairiya Ahmed. I'm a community leader in the Lawrence Heights community. So what Beatrice just talked about is actually I've participated, learned, got educated through Beatrice when we had our civic committees back way back in the days. So through that, I was able, and other community leaders were able to come together, look at different issues, especially when elections are coming around, and how we can mobilize each other and get our what we want our community across, right? So it's been really we've been very involved in, especially right now, even though it's really crunch time and everything like that. We've been really working hard, looking at specific issues, and a lot of the issues is education that we find a lot in specifically in our community is it's education and youth employment, right? Have been the biggest issues. So we've been really trying to get youth involved with the election and understanding about voting, right? Especially communities like these, we forget about our youth that right now are at that age where they could vote. And most of the time, they don't know what to do or don't know how to vote or don't even know the parties that are running. So for myself, we do a lot of like information sessions that we provide these information for them. Saroja attended one of ours last Friday. So we did like a youth information fair where we had Saroja from Social Planning Toronto come out and give out information for youth. Those are 18 and up regarding understanding about voting. Most of them had no idea, didn't know if they never got nothing in the mail, tried to understand how the process of that. So we were able to support at least about 30 youth that came out to the who were interested in voting. That's one aspect of it. Other aspect of it is getting youth out to remind each other about voting and also reminding adults about voting, right? I think it's also important we kind of work together as a community, yes, and also the youth reminding their own families about voting, right? Sometimes a youth might be interested, but maybe their parents are not, right? So also educating that piece and also understanding that, I think it's very important. So right now, as we speak, election is basically around the corner. We have youth that are reminding each other, reminding anyone that they see about voting because they really want their issues to be heard and to find some solution to it. So we've been really working really closely with the youth and adults as well as and the rest of the community leaders in the community. We've tried our best to bring the different areas of parties that are running to come into one space and have these conversation and answer questions from the community, which has also been a great way for the youth to kind of be listened to of what their issues are, right? Most of the kids, like when we had the first election, they were too young to understand and whatnot. But now we have a lot of the youth that are 18 and up, which are interested. And also because the community we're coming from right now, we're going through revitalization. A lot of youth are having trouble when it comes to if they want to decide to move out and find a place of their own. So it's really hard. A lot of the youth that are right now in university, it's hard for them to move out on their own, right? So they are really looking for affordable housing and whatnot. And especially right now, in a community like this, we're building almost more like 5,000 units, but more than half of those are all private units, right, for market rent. So how do we make some of those affordable? So we're looking at different strategies in that sense of that and trying to see what promises that our politicians that are running that could provide for us in our community. So I'll just leave it off there. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Khairiya. Yeah, it's super exciting to hear how you've been involved in this work for so many years and that youth who are some of them younger than 18 or just turning 18 are super excited to vote, and some of them don't even, their parents don't vote, but they're eligible and they're really excited about it. And yeah, I'm really privileged to have witnessed this work going on in the community. Thank you so much. And yeah, next we have John Beebe, who's going to speak a little bit more about his work with democratic engagement and exchange, and also kind of walk us through a little activity. Thank you so much, John and Khairiya, for your great presentation. John, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Khairiya and Beatrice. totally inspiring to see your work and, you know, the incredible things you're doing in your community. I mean, I think that's the core of building a healthy and vibrant democracy. So my name's John Beebe. For those of you I haven't met yet, I lead the Democratic Engagement Exchange at Toronto Metropolitan University. And our core mission is to build a vibrant and inclusive democracy in Canada. But really what that means is working with incredible folks like everyone here, because what a vibrant and inclusive democracy in Canada requires is all of us. And so everybody who's here. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to do a very brief and very quick overview of voting in the provincial election. So let me share my screen here. And it's gonna, for many of you, this will be a sort of quick reminder of things you already know, but pay attention. It'll be very quick, and there is a quiz. So, when we get to that, you'll see where your chance is to engage in the quiz. Okay. Let's get my screens working here. Okay, so if nothing else you remember from this, remember that voting in Ontario, it's easy and it's fun. So those are our two takeaways that you should remember. We are very lucky in Ontario and in Canada generally that our election management bodies, Elections Ontario, Elections Canada, they really work to try to make voting easy for everyone. And they're on our side. Like, they're our friends, they're our allies. If you have questions, give them a call. You got issues, give them a call. They want to help you to vote. They're not there to make it hard for you to vote. They're there to make it easy for you to vote. So see them that way. A lot of you probably have worked in elections or know people who've worked in elections. That's who's doing it. That's who's doing the job. So get right into it. Who can vote? If you're 18 years old on election day, a resident of Ontario and a Canadian citizen, you can vote. That's it. Nothing else. And so there's no other provisions. Follow those things, you're good to go. So how to vote? Again, super simple. You can vote on election day. If you vote on election day, you have to vote at your assigned polling location. Election day is February 27th. Voting takes place from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Go in, vote. Your assigned polling location, we'll talk a little bit about how to find that. During advanced polling days, which started today, curious, maybe put in the chat if anybody voted today, or if they'll be planning to vote tomorrow or on Saturday. I think I'll probably go Saturday to vote. The weather is going to be decent. You don't know what it's going to be like next week, so probably should try to vote, next couple of days. But you can vote at any polling location in your electoral district. So most of us who live in the city, that's going to make sure, it doesn't mean any polling location in the city, but it's in our electoral district. And again, you check with Elections Ontario, that'll show you where you can vote based on your zip code. I got my voter information card in the mail today. I'll talk about that in a minute. That tells you also where you can vote. You can also, if that doesn't work for you, you can go to any local election office, or actually, I shouldn't say any. You should go to the local election office in your electoral district, and you can vote. You can vote, both for advanced polls, but also next week. If you miss the advanced polls and not going to be able to vote on the 27th, just go to your local election office. You can vote by mail, but the vote by mail deadline to request a mail-in is tomorrow, and it's actually not that easy. So I would only encourage you to vote by mail if you can't go in person for some reason. And if you need to do that option, you need to order your vote by mail tomorrow, and you need to go to Elections Ontario to do that, to order your vote by mail packet. All right, how to mark your ballot. If anybody who hasn't yet voted, super simple. You just write an X next to the candidate of your choice. There are not very many choices. We're, in Canada, we only have one, position we're voting for, our member of provincial parliament. I'm originally from the United States. In the United States, my ballot was like 3 pages. I had so many things I had to vote on. I had to vote on my water district sewer manager. I don't even know what a water district sewer manager is, but there was only one person running, so it was quite easy to figure out who to vote for. But here we're very lucky. You only have to vote for one position, and you just mark an X. And if you make a mistake, you mark it the wrong way, you change your mind, you can return your ballot, and the nice people at Elections Ontario will give you a new ballot. ID requirements, again, super simple. I wouldn't even call it ID. It's really just a proof of address. Anything that can prove your address. So if you have a voter information card, that can be a proof of address. And if you have a voter information card, you only need one form of ID with your name. Okay. Or bring one form of ID with your name and current address. You know, for many people, if you have a driver's license with your current address, that's the simplest thing. But remember that a health card and a passport don't have your address. So if you don't have your voter information card, then that's not sufficient. A photo ID is not required. So you don't have to worry about getting a photo ID. So I'm going to a little bit more about IDs. So again, with a voter information card, you don't have to have something with an address, so a passport or a health card. There's like 20 or 30 other IDs that can work. You can go to Elections Ontario to look that up. Without a voter information card, a driver's license, a school transcript or report card, a canceled check, a pay stub, all of that, as long as it has your current address, is great. Again, if for some reason right now you think, okay, wait a second, I don't have something with my current address, or I'm not sure it's right, go to Elections Ontario, check out the long list of ID requirements they have there, and find something, or just give them a call and they'll help you figure out what ID you need. Right. All right. So voter registration. So the registration, to update your registration for this election, that time has closed, but that doesn't matter. You do not need to be registered to vote before you go to vote. If you have ID with your address and you show up at your polling location, you will be able to vote. They will register you there. This is the biggest misperception that we see in our work. People say, "Oh, well, I'm not registered to vote. I can't vote." Well, you don't need to be. We're very lucky. And the other thing is that most people are actually automatically registered to vote. So people think, "Oh, well, I never did anything, but I'm still on the voter list. How did that happen?" Well, when you pay taxes or when you get a driver's license, that information is shared with the election management bodies, and you are registered to vote automatically. We were working in North York many, many years ago, Beatriz, probably more than 10 years ago, and a woman who had just become a citizen 5 weeks before came up and was checking her voter registration, and she was already registered to vote because apparently, I guess, Immigration and Citizenship Canada had shared information and they had automatically registered her. So most of us are automatically registered. Okay, advanced voting, which is going on now. In most places, it's 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. And you can vote in any location. So great option. Okay, quiz time. Ready? So maybe people can put this in the chat if their answers here in the chat. And it's just true, false. So, no pressure. I won't be grading it at the end. But, okay, first question. You have to be registered to vote before going to vote. True, false? I give people a second to throw their answers up in the... Yeah. All right, we're getting a little bit of a mix. Yeah. A lot of falses here. Yeah, correct. False. You can register to vote when you go to vote. As I just said, most people are automatically registered to vote. Okay, you need a photo ID to vote. True or false? All right, get some falses here. What else? Yeah. All right. Yes, false. You need to be able to prove your current address. And the voter information card can prove your address if you get one of those. And there are dozens of forms of ID. So again, okay. So during advanced voting, you can only vote at your assigned polling location. True or false? Well, so this is a little bit a trick question, but it's false. You can vote at any polling location in your electoral district. You do have to be in your electoral district, but you can vote at any polling location in your electoral district. So that's information you can get from Elections Ontario. The last piece is just sort of bonus question. Should you take a photo of yourself when you're voting? True or false? You're allowed to take a photo of yourself when you're voting. And the answer is false. Again, you're not allowed to take photos of yourself when you're voting, but after you vote outside the polling place, you should totally take a photo of your selfie, share it with your friends, share it with your family, inspire people to go vote. All right. Okay, I'm going to quickly stop there. And any questions about voting that I can answer quickly now? We'll have time for Q&A afterwards, but okay, great question about proxy options. And the answer is unfortunately no. In Ontario, there's not a proxy option vote, so you are the only person who can vote for yourself. Yeah. And I'm with the Democratic Engagement Exchange. I can share the website in a moment here on our through the chat. Because we have lots of information about voting. Okay. And Saroja, just one quick if you have questions, as I said, Elections Ontario, and I've seen that Beatriz has already put it in the chat. These are the best place to call them. And if you call them, they're super helpful. Like real people answer the phone. It's a human being. You don't have to push lots of buttons. All right. Yeah. Khairiya, you have a question? Hands up?
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah. So for example, let's say if you have like in your community, or people want to vote, like seniors, maybe they can't leave their unit due to accessibility issue or disability. How does that work?
Yeah, no, great question. So there are provisions for people who cannot leave their home or where they're living, or people in hospitals. There are special provisions for them, and Elections Ontario will actually go do home visits in some circumstances. The trick is I would call them now, right, and let people know that they need that kind of support.
Bishrat, go ahead.
Question, John. So if somebody is a resident in Ontario but not a Canadian citizen, can he or she vote?
Yeah, great question. No, you need to be a Canadian citizen to vote. So that's true for federal elections, provincial elections, and municipal elections. One day maybe that'll change for municipal elections, but today you need to be a Canadian citizen.
Thanks, John. I had a question about folks who might have a disability or dealing with chronic illness, and if they're stuck at home, what are the options for accessible voting?
Yeah. So as I was mentioning before, and Mercedes put something in the chat there, which is great, that saying you can schedule a visit to vote at home by contacting your elections office by 6 p.m. on February 26th. So if you're stuck at home, that is something to do. I would do that even earlier just to confirm your need, and they will accommodate you. As I say, they're on your side. For people who have other disabilities or issues, there are lots of accessibility factors that the Elections Ontario does to help people who may have, a hearing impairment or a sight impairments. They have accommodations to support people. But again, I'd encourage you to contact Elections Ontario directly if you have particular questions or particular circumstances. They can help you walk you through that. For people who are in hospitals, again, they do hospital visits. And for people who are incarcerated, they do voting in prisons. Canada is one of the few places in the world where people who are incarcerated still are enfranchised. They can still vote. And that's where they go to vote.
Thank you so much to our speakers again. That was really educational. It's good to feel informed with such a short election period. And just so everyone knows, there's a ton of resources out there this year for you if you want to learn more about the issues, which we'll talk about in a bit, after we learn about these fact sheets that SPT has just developed. They've just come out. So I'm really excited to share a little preview of them right now. So this is what they look like. And we try for every municipal and provincial election to create fact sheets that will help people understand what the issues are in the election that are important to equity deserving communities, as well as questions to ask candidates. So I'm really excited to introduce my colleague Mercedes Sharp-Zayas, who will share a little bit more about what's in these fact sheets and what we can advocate for to our candidates.
Thanks so much, Saroja, and thanks everyone for coming out and sticking around. So we'll go through these quite quickly, but I'm hoping one of our team members could throw a link in the chat to all of the fact sheets so you can access this on your own time. And if people have questions or concerns about these key issues, it's a great explainer. So we have 3 different key issues we highlighted in this upcoming election. Number 1 is housing and homelessness. So a big recognition we had is that Ontario needs more affordable, non-market and supportive housing. Some key stats that help with understanding this is that there was a commitment to create 1.5 million homes by 2031, but the province has already been falling behind on that goal. The wait list is over 268,000 people waiting for subsidized housing, and the wait time is on average 5 to 7 years. We also recognize that Ontarians need stronger rent control. So over 1/3 of Ontario households are renters, 55%, so over half are living in unacceptable conditions, whether that be that they pay more than 1/3 of their income on rent, so it's unaffordable, or it's inaccessible to family-sized housing, or it's inadequate in other ways. We also recognize that, vacancy decontrol is one of the main reasons why we don't have rent control. So if someone moves out of their unit, prices go up. And also in homes that are built after 2018, that exemption doesn't exist. We also recognize that the housing crisis doesn't affect all communities equally. So 1 in 3 Indigenous adults in Toronto, for example, are precariously housed or houseless. Nearly half of newcomer tenants live in unaffordable housing. As well as around 40% of long-term immigrant tenants are living in unaffordable housing. And we really need to effectively address rising homelessness. So for example, there are approximately 80,000 homeless Ontarians in 2024. That might be an underrepresentation of the real number. This has increased 6-fold in terms of refugees and asylum seekers who are facing houselessness. And over 150% increase in homelessness in rural areas. And that number goes up to 200 in Northern Ontario. So the fact sheets also include a series of questions that you can share with your candidate to help address these issues. So if you go to the next slide, you could ask your candidate, for example, how does your party intend to ensure that Ontario catches up and meets the goal of building 1.5 million homes by 2031? What steps will they take to increase investment in non-market, affordable, and supportive housing? What are your plans to strengthen rent control measures to protect tenants from rent increases, especially in newer buildings? How do you plan to support low-income renters who are at risk of not being able to afford their rent if they lose their income? And also, how do you plan to realize the human right to housing, especially when it comes to unhoused people in Ontario? Move on to the second fact sheet. I realize maybe you have to go a bit quicker through this, but employment, income, and poverty is the next one. So recognizing that poverty is on the rise. Many Ontarians are facing food insecurity. Childhood poverty in Toronto, for example, is at an all-time high at 25.3%. There's also inadequate social assistance, which traps people in poverty. Many of us know OW and ODSP is not adequate. It means that you can't actually afford housing that is on the market currently. There's also been massive changes to the employment services as well as social assistance. So Ontario has been merging those two systems, which has actually been creating a lot of gaps for job seekers, especially people with disabilities. It's worthwhile to note that the unemployment rate in Ontario has gone up to 7.6%, and that's at 18.2% for youth, specifically with regards to unemployment. And as many of us know, minimum wage is not actually keeping up with the cost of living. So we're currently at a $1.20 minimum wage, whereas the living wage across Ontario sits more so closer to $19.50 to $26 per hour, depending on where you live. So in terms of key questions for candidates, you can ask them what actions they're going to take in terms of supporting a comprehensive intersectional poverty reduction strategy with key targets, especially. Will they actually double the rates of OW and ODSP? How will they actually improve the integrated employment services to better support job seekers? And what actions will they take to raise the minimum wage? And we'll move to the last one real quick. Supervised consumption sites, of course, is another big area. We've seen a mass closure of supervised consumption sites that are within 200 meters of schools or daycares. This means that 10 out of 17 sites will be closed across Ontario. And we want to recognize that shutting down these supervised consumption sites will actually cause harm. We've seen a rise in overdose deaths, over 100% of that happening since COVID-19. There's a 74% rise in opioid toxicity related deaths, especially in Toronto. This is disproportionately affecting houseless individuals. So within SES service users, 91% of them identify as being unhoused. 1 in 6 of the deaths related to the overdoses are with houseless individuals. And also SESs are a really important space where people actually can get connected to critical health and social services. So there were over 1 million visits to supervised consumption sites between 2020 to 2024, and 1,500 overdoses were reversed on these sites. So with regards to questions that you could be asking your candidates, on the next slide, you can be asking them how they plan to address the increasing rates of opioid-related deaths in Ontario, especially around the closure of safe consumption sites, how they plan to work with community organizations and public health to create solutions for the opioid crisis, and what alternative solutions can be implemented to address this crisis as well. So those are the fact sheets. They're all shared in the chat now, and hopefully these are big issues you can continue to mobilize around.
Thank you so much, Mercedes. And we are going to be sharing the fact sheets as a resource with all of you in a follow-up email as well, but they're on our website now. As you can see, the links are in the, just a friendly reminder to vote. You can do advanced voting as John mentioned, between now and the 22nd from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. in your electoral riding. And then on election day, February 27th from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. We also have a number of resources that we've shared on our website, which we'll send in an email to you. These are issue-specific campaigns. So if you're really passionate about childcare, decent work, education, environment and climate, food security, healthcare, housing, poverty reduction, and income security, these would be really amazing organizations to look up and follow because they already have campaign materials. They have really clear demands for what they want to see these parties commit to. And you can go on their website, sign their petitions, amplify their key messages, ask your own candidates about these issues as well. And then we also, Social Planning Toronto has our fact sheets that we welcome everyone to share, print off if you want, post them up in your bulletin boards, buildings. You can even host meetings to share them out. And we have some resources for folks who want to understand the voting system better as well, including those who are unhoused, how to vote when you're unhoused, and how to vote if you're a newcomer or what kind of information you need to know about that. And yeah, lastly, I want to thank everyone here for participating. I want to thank all our speakers for sharing your knowledge with us on best practices and voter engagement. And thank you to the SPT team